You're listening to the Tank Magazine podcast. In this episode, Tank's assistant editor, Lili Owen Rowlands, talks with her publisher, Michael Mack, about his selection of the season's most important books, which featured in this year's Tank book issue. His eponymously named publishing house, Mack, specialises in the publication of works by artists, writers, and curators across visual culture. Started in 2010 in London, Mack is now considered one of the most eminent independent publishing houses in the country, and has released books by Tacita Dean, Thomas Demand, and Luigi Ghieri, among others. They discuss the photographer, filmmaker, and theorist Alan Sekula's seminal Photography Against the Grain, the artist Sam Contis' new book Deep Springs, which deals with masculinity and the relationship between the human body and the landscape, and the interplay of text and image in book publishing.
So I'm Michael Mack and I'm a publisher. I run a small independent publishing house based in London, working with artists, authors, curators in the visual arts who are interested in books, very specifically who are interested in the book form as a potential platform for their work. So we're not particularly interested in making catalogues. We're not particularly interested in photographers who want to create a lookbook of their commercial work. It's much more the idea of artists for whom, as they're making the work, as they're thinking about what the form the work might be realised in, the book springs to mind. And those sorts of book artists are the ones that we tend to focus on.
You made a selection of books for our book issue, and the one that immediately struck me as most interesting, mainly because I'm a big fan, is Photography Against the Grain. You're republishing it, is that right?
Yes, indeed. And it's a little bit embarrassing to choose one of our own books, I think, in a list of important books, but I can justify that on the basis that it's not really our book. The book was originally published in the early 80s by Nova Scotia, a university press in America, in a series edited by a very famous art historian called Benjamin Buchloh. And he was, along with Sekula and a number of other people, involved in the inception of October magazine, which for many of us was a seminal journal in our education, continues to be a significant reference point as a site for significant critical discourse around visual culture. But Sekula was one of the rare participants who was also an image maker. He's a photographer, an artist, who wrote some of the most important and influential essays from a distinctly West Coast Marxist perspective, which the two ideas of being Los Angeles based and being a Marxist seem anomalous, but with a lightness of touch and yet a kind of connection to certain historical perspectives that I feel particularly resonates today, despite the fact that we are some 40 years on from the original publication of many of those essays. It feels to me important that especially younger generations of people interested in visual culture should read these texts and understand alternative perspectives on visual culture, distinct from the largely market-driven concerns that a lot of the art world seems to be focused on these days.
It quickly went out of print when it was originally made, right? And then there was a bootleg copy that someone uploaded online.
The reality is, that's the really interesting thing about certain types of publishing, because the reality is that book, in photocopy versions, and now in a digital version, which is available online, and I initially thought I need to try and get this taken down from some Slovakian website, with the authority of the Sekula estate, that I could chase them down, threatening lawyers and everything. And then I realised it doesn't really matter. The work is out there being distributed, but people are still interested in having the original book. And I go back to that because he designed this version. He designed this book. We had to remake the whole thing because the era it was made in, there weren't any digital files or anything to reference, but we had to effectively by hand copy everything he'd done, fake the original font, etc., in order just as an homage to his original ideas, but to create it into that to build the discrete form that is so perfect, the book form, which allows you to take it with you, have it on your shelf, pick it up when you want to, and refer to it, as distinct from them being scattered through digital files in different places.
The idea of the text and images combining in this work seems to be something that Mac is quite good at. Is that something that you see as a project, as being part of what you do?
Distinctly so. I believe that one of the regularly referred to burgeoning space of the photo book tends to lack much self-reflection and serious writing in particular to contextualize the work. And I'm not one who argues for kind of forwards by important, weighty writers in photo books or in art books in general. In fact, I argue against that. But I do feel that text is often kind of dismissed, or when it is present, it's just designed as another picture. It's just presented as another picture in the layout. And that comes, I think, from designers working with text as a picture, not actually reading the text, and therefore I'm trying to determine how it should be used. So it's fundamental for us, this relationship of image and text, and how in the book form in particular you can elaborate that. But more specifically than that, the interest that I have in visual artists who write has resulted in a series of books which we are continuing to run with next year. We've worked with Luigi Ghiri's writings, the first translation from Italian of Luigi Ghiri's writings, and Juan Fontcuberta, the Catalan artist, who's an amazing writer. And then next year we're doing Victor Bergen, so similarly attempting to bring together a collection of his seminal essays and make them available at a very accessible price as a distinct, portion of our publishing, which is just aimed at education and attempting to build discourse around visual culture from these important thinkers.
And another artist whose book, so Sophie Kells and so forth, which is a huge volume of her work. She often works with text, but in quite different ways, in very unusual and provocative ways.
Hilarious.
Yeah, exactly.
Very often very funny.
And I think sometimes people miss that, actually. They miss the humour. They just think she's a kind of mad French woman, but I love her. I loved that she did this thing about giving birth to her cat.
Yes. Her work is often also very sexy in the way that she is in person. She's one of those people who lives the life of an artist and makes the work that is her own. It has her very own distinct imprimatur, and the books that she makes similarly. She's one of those artists who can see in books, if that makes any sense. She has a clear vision and desire to make books from her work, but doesn't struggle with the notion of the different mediums in which the work is applied. So she's a brilliant installation artist, and then she'll make a book which has the same work, and in itself it's completely distinct and different version of the ideas and concepts that she's been playing with. And I do know her, but I've never published her, and because she works with this genius publisher and designer in Paris called Xavier Barral, and the projects that they've made in recent years have just been extraordinary. Each one onto the next has been my favourite book of that period, and this is the latest one of those. Yeah.
I think another one of the books that you picked as one of an important publication for the summer is the Un Universo Pequeño, which, if you talk to artists who think in books or who have this particular idea, this is a book with an incredible concept at its core. Maybe you could talk a bit about just how unusual it is.
Indeed. So Antonio Zubanova is a Spanish artist based in Madrid. Relatively young. He's quite well known in Spain, but very little outside Spain. And this is an incredibly ambitious project, in large part because of the limitations he imposed upon himself in the making of the series of images, which was to photograph within a 1 square metre space of a Madrid street corner. And those limitations, if you think about it, are mind-boggling. And yet within that, he was able to elaborate through this extensive book, which at no point, despite my poor description of its contents, is ever boring, because it manages to suggest kind of the universal nature almost of existence through the series of quite banal quotidian images, which is what you would expect from a large period of time spent in a very small outdoor space on a city street. It's beautifully designed, where the images kind of are overlaid, and the format and uses of picture boxes and typography is very, very beautifully ranged. But at the back of it, the spine of it is this rigorous approach to the notion of time and scale and space, which is a thread that's pulled through the whole book as well. It's just beautifully done and hugely successful, but also is one of those that will never really be known very widely, but deserves to be.
A little bit like Nothing But Clouds, which is a book that was self-published by
Christina Jawotskian.
Yes, and you're publishing this?
Indeed, now we are going to publish it. So this is an opportunity for me to kind of talk about something that I'm quite passionate about, which is that a large part of our publishing is of new, completely unknown artists. And interestingly, they're not necessarily young, because one of the books that we're launching next week is of a 72-year-old Kent-based photographer, and it is his first book. And we've actually done that on numerous occasions, worked with people who just simply, they haven't broken through to be able to make their own book. Whereas Christina is a Leipzig-based photographer, where she's studying at the moment. And she sent along a maquette to our first book award, which is an award that we run where we invite people to submit maquettes and choose 10 which are shortlisted, and one that's the winner, and the winner is published by us alongside an exhibition at Photo London. And I just became fascinated by various elements of Christina's maquette, and I think a clear indication of how successful I think it is that in my discussions with her since we agreed to publish it, I'm pretty sure very little will change into the final form of it. So from her very simple, large format paperback book with a silk-screened dark image onto the cover, through these pages of almost newsprint, which are all full bleed and which each deal with these architectural details through city spaces. It's so convincing. It's such an area of interest that I've always had in relation to photography, architecture, the way in which photography reconstructs space and represents it without reference to anthropomorphic scale necessarily, so that the camera kind of creates these abstract spaces. But what she's managed to do so well, despite her youth, is use the book form to create this almost filmic sequence through the turning of the pages and the extensive, it's over 200-page book, which is quite unusual for somebody at that age and stage.
Are there some artists who want to have a little bit more creative control about what the book looks like? Are there others that feel that it's not necessarily their domain? How does that fluctuate?
It really does vary, but I'll be very honest with you, that's the part, that process, that engagement, the making and the determining form and sequence and finish and content in general is the rub. It's the most enjoyable part of the bookmaking process. The rest of publishing is a business, and like most business, it's filled with inanities in large part. But the making and working with these intense individuals who are really have given, in many cases, given their lives over to a certain piece of work is extraordinarily enjoyable in large part.
Should we talk a little bit about what Mack is doing this summer? So one of the books you're launching is Deep Springs. I've talked with a few American friends. They're a little bit more familiar with Deep Springs, the school, which is an all-male arts college based in Nevada in the desert, right? In a valley called Deep Springs. And let's talk a little bit about the book and the school, maybe.
Sam Contis is a quite young American photographer, artist. She studied at Yale, so she comes from a very particular kind of history of photographic practice in which she's constantly questioning the nature of the medium, for a start, the nature of the photographic means of representation. But unusually she applied it in a quite direct social documentary style to begin with, where she visited this school which has a long history, a history in which young men and boys go to the school in order to have an education which takes them far beyond the classroom. It takes them into the deep west, if you like, into these traditions of working the land, working with animals in the land, and working in the landscape. And perhaps it's unfair to suggest that a man could not have made the work in the way that Sam has, but it has this. It walks a really difficult line between telling the individual tales of these boys becoming men, their changing physical state, their relationship to weather and animals and lifestyle, and the history of the place as well through combined ephemera. And it dances beautifully into these different places and spaces without ever being a straightforward document or simplistic temporal parentheses for the narrative she's attempting to elaborate. It's so open-ended and gentle and beautiful. It's incredibly successful, and she's going back to your question about to what extent do people come with really firm ideas. She came with really clear, specific, strong certainties, and was very willing to respond in terms of the paper for the cover and things like that, and certain design elements. But all the work is hers. The strength of the work absolutely comes from her determination to create the book in this way.
It's a beautiful, incredibly intimate book. There's a lot of skin, and you really get this sense of these. Normally, there's about 26, I think, in a year. These men and boys who live in such close proximity with one another, and they invite their lecturers to teach them, and they choose them with the kind of academic board. Did they invite Sam? How did Sam approach them? I'm interested in what it would have been like to go there as a photographer, because they have women lecturers, and there are lots of stories that I've read online about what that's like. I think it's overwhelming, yeah.
Oh, really? Well, I think Sam is somebody who could handle that incredibly well. I think that's an indication of that is the work that she left with, which at no point appears to be prying or voyeuristic in any way. And yet there are so many distinct lives she's touched and stories she's told of individuals you can feel through this book. I imagine it was incredibly challenging in so many ways, and yet there's no element of invasion at all. So I don't know the answer to the question of how was it for her. I know that it was tough, but in relation to in terms of the relationships, I'm confident that she couldn't have come away with that work without having kind of built very, very strong, as you say, intimate relationships.
It feels there are lots of images of butchery and kind of these intestines splaying out of kind of carcass. It feels both incredibly masculine, but also lots of the men who are deep springers, I think they call themselves afterwards. They talk about having to adopt in many ways of dealing with a kind of emotional labour that they would normally have had female friends to talk about, and in many ways they say it makes you very androgynous. So in many senses this book feels both very masculine with the cowboy hats, but also quite androgynous.
I think the perfect ending to and beginning of the book is the fact that most people think that Sam Contis is the guy.
Probably your biggest publication of the summer was the Richard Moss Incoming. It's done incredibly well. He's obviously won the Pre-Pictet Prize.
Yeah. It's an important book because of what it's about. It's a highly political piece of art, the film is. And we wanted to make a book which whilst it could never replace the 3-screen video piece, managed to transport the viewer to the themes and ideas that he has engaged with, which are fundamentally migration and the issues facing people attempting to enter Europe, and in people trying to come to the UK, etc., and also entering through all the different areas of Western Europe.
It's an unrelenting piece, and the kind of length and the weightiness of the book actually reflects that really well. It's kind of never ending, it feels overwhelming. I think the book captures it really well. And what else is coming from Mack this summer?
Yeah, we have quite a few things. We have a re-edition of one of the most famous photo books made in Japan, Ravens by Masahisa Fukasi. It's a book that has passed into the market in the sense that you can't buy it unless you're willing to spend X thousand numbers, and yet it's a great book, and so should be available. So anyway, we've put a lot of effort into remaking it, and it's had a wonderful reception. We'll be launching it in May across the world. And again, it feels important as a publishing house to be playing this role of making accessible really important works, can be seen and can be accessed everywhere, which is a big part of the project that we're working on. And then mixed into that, we have numerous publications by completely unknown artists and some very famous artists, and I like that mixture, because that keeps us alive.